Regular listeners of our Aliens Explored podcast might have realised by now that Stu has a bit of a thing about crop circles. Last weekend he went off on a crop circle hunt in Wiltshire without me. He took his friend Amy instead. So this week's podcast is going to be a bit different from the usual. Anyway, it's always nice to see Amy, who will be joining us on the show, and I'm looking forward to hearing about what they discovered down in Crop Circle Central. This week's podcast is dedicated to our Explorer of the Week, Israel. Israel has signed up to our Patreon, and it's with his support that we are able to keep this show on the road. Check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Aliens Explored. We have all sorts of reward schemes at various levels of support, and I'm sure you will find something that's right for you.
Aliens Explored is a weekly podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions and other strange events from both a believing and a sceptical perspective whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it?
Welcome back, listeners, to Aliens Explored, your weekly podcast where we look at UFOs, UAPs, ETs, gremlins, strange weird things creeping out of the woodwork. And speaking of which, I'm one of your hosts, Stu Jackson.
And I'm your other host, Neil Kelly.
And it's not just the two of us today, is it? Because we are joined by Amy. Hello, Amy.
Hi, Amy.
Hello. Hi.
So good of you to join us today. Now, many of our listeners, those who listen to Tales from the 20 side, will of course know you as Della Thornbury.
Yeah.
And indeed, many of our listeners also follow Star Trek Adventures as well. So Lieutenant Davok in the Star Trek Adventures roleplay game that we stream live every fortnight. So yes, listeners, it is that Amy.
That Amy, right.
But you have quite a recognisable voice anyway, don't you, Amy?
Yeah, it's pretty irritating, isn't it?
Shrill. Raspy.
Yes, that's why you keep getting invited onto podcasts, is because it's irritating. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you're here with us today because we had an amazing weekend out in Wiltshire, did we not? Crop circle chasing, my favourite thing. My favourite thing. So, help us out here. Prior to, I'll say prior to Aliens Explored, what did you know or not know about crop circles?
I knew very little. It's probably come up in documentaries and things that I've probably watched on YouTube, but nothing that I could specifically call to mind and say, this is what a crop circle is. It was very much a new thing for me. Right,
okay. So, I mean, I bang on about them quite passionately and at length when people will let me. So it was a very, very brave thing when you said you wanted to see some crop circles. So let's tell Neil. Let's tell Neil about them in order that we saw them. I think that would be the best way forward. So the first one we went to see. What were your first impressions with that one?
Oh, so that one we saw was almost a 3-circle. It was like a circle with 2 other circles either side of it. It had already been harvested, but you could still see the pattern that it was meant to be forming.
So you weren't trampling crops; you were just walking across stubble, but you could still the pattern was there, still there. So a big circle and a little circle either side.
Well, yeah. So they were connected to the circles to the left and the right. They weren't fully spherical because they were merged into a circle. Yeah.
If you imagine what looks like a 3-dimensional image made with a single line that makes 3 circles.
Okay.
This, for our listeners who want to Google such things, this was the crop circle this year, 2022, that was first reported around the middle of July and was in Ley Wood near Devizes. Now, just to quite, you say it had been harvested. It has certainly been cut, and it had been cut very, very short by the farmer. And farmers sometimes do this to put people off, well, doing exactly what we did, basically.
Well, I think it's just called harvesting your crop, isn't it?
It is, but he'd left the outside of the circle, hadn't he?
Yes, yeah.
And to be fair, it was cut much shorter than you get with harvesting as well. So he destroyed it. He destroyed the crop circle, basically, while leaving the rest of the crops untouched.
Now, we've talked about crop circles before, where there's actually a real danger that they will invite they will incite visitors to come and trample all over the crops coming to see the crop circle, so causing quite some damage to farmers' crops and cost.
Exactly, and by that turn, I can understand why a farmer is going to destroy a crop circle. It's they're putting off people coming and trampling the crops and destroying their revenue, basically. So I do get that. But looking around at the evidence in this particular crop circle, I was personally a little disappointed to find that it didn't have any of the trademarks that you normally see in what I always term genuine crop circles or non-man-made crop circles. I was looking for certain size. I'd had a suspicion because to me it was quite a small crop circle. So, in fact, Amy, that's a good point. To me, that was a really small crop circle, that very first one. Did it seem small to you? Were you expecting something much bigger, or...?
As it was the first one that I'd seen, when I saw it, I thought it was quite big. But I did, where it was located, which was not far off a path and quite visible from like quite a local walk nearby, seems a bit of a convenient location to have one. I thought, stumbling, especially after seeing the other ones as well, like how tucked away they were in comparison.
So, how big was it? I mean, how far across would you say one of those circles was?
Was that?
In diameter?
We measured it, didn't we?
We did. The radius of each circle was approximately 56 foot.
Okay, and that's what you call a small circle.
Yes,
a small crop circle. Okay,
so just over 100 foot from top to bottom, and about 300 foot across, give or take. Give or take.
Because I mean, before I'd heard of the crop circle phenomenon, I had noticed sometimes going past farmland that I would see what looked like that some of the crops have been randomly flattened in a sort of circular or a sort of spiral kind of effect. And someone told me that was caused by tornadoes, because apparently in England, sort of between sort of London and Birmingham, we have more tornadoes than they have in Kansas. They're just a bit smaller. You know, they don't destroy homes and suck away people and cows. They just mess your crops about a bit.
Yeah.
So
tornadoes.
That'll be so you're talking about something about 10 feet in diameter, maybe.
Yeah, tornadoes have been ascribed as a potential cause for crop circles.
But you can see that it was done in a sort of spiral. You can see it had been done by something that, like, the crops have been whisked.
Yes, well, doing that with planks, like basically planks under your feet and a bit of rope, will do that as well.
Okay.
But yeah, that was the first one. So, and we also met quite an interesting character as well, didn't we, Amy?
We did. We weren't the only people hunting.
No, met a German chap, a nice, friendly chap called Dieter, who was also looking for the crop circle as well as we were searching for it. And yeah. So I think that quite surprised you, didn't it, to find other people? I know it certainly surprised Rick, didn't it?
Yes, yeah, it did him. I think I don't know. I guess you mentioned that there hadn't been that many this year, and there weren't too many reported when we went out to have a look. So it would make sense that the likelihood of bumping into somebody else also looking for the same thing would go up. But I don't know what I was if I was expecting to see someone else. I think it's nice that we did, though.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Did you take any measurements with your Geiger counter or anything like that?
That was my job. I had.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, did nothing.
Nothing?
Nah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No change.
Amy was operating the Geiger counter. I was I had the EMF reader. We didn't. Yeah, there was nothing from it, which is quite, you don't expect to find things, but you never know. Occasionally, you do get something. Very occasionally.
That would be inside the crop circle, and then the reading would just immediately drop when you step outside the circle. With that sort of precision.
Sometimes it tails off as you move away from the circle. Sometimes there's just, as we found, just nothing. Yeah, kind of bit of everything, really. Now, the next crop circle we went to see, we didn't actually go and see in the end, did we? We sent the drone up to find it. Discovered that it had also been one that had been cut down by the farmer. And also, once we sent the drone up, we then discovered that actually the farmer was actively discouraging people from going and looking. So we scratched that one off. But then we went
stood there with his shotgun. Because actually, think of it. It is early to harvest crops, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what. I always thought crops were harvested around September time.
We funnily enough, August normally. And your harvest festival stuff. That comes at the end of harvest, but yeah, August would be normal. In fact, we noticed, didn't we, Amy, as we're driving through Wiltshire, a lot of the fields had been harvested. That led to a conversation. I was confused as to why they would be harvesting so early. You had a couple of theories, didn't you, Amy?
Yeah, I just assume that it's due to lack of supplies, though. That's a third world situation, so I think it's more of a need than a.
But
earlier.
I would have thought certain crops they won't have grown enough, will they? You'll be harvesting something that's just worthless.
Well, my thinking was the more it grows, the more of it there'll be. But I don't know. I don't know enough about farming.
Certain plants have to reach a certain maturity. Maybe if they were growing had their own little hemp farm going, or the poppy fields. We've got to harvest this quick.
Well, the vast majority this year around Wiltshire was wheat and barley. It was just wheat and barley as far as the eye could see, basically. So then we went on to Hack Pen Hill, and we arrived at another crop circle where the entire field had been harvested that time, hadn't it? It wasn't that he cut it short. So he'd left. The farmer had clearly left the crop circle relatively untouched, but he had harvested the field. Amy, why don't you tell us what your thoughts were on that?
So this one was a lot bigger than the first one that we saw. It was arranged to have 10 triangles.
It was, yes.
Within it?
Yes.
And I can't recall if this was a circle or a hexagon shape.
It was a circle with the 10
circle.
triangles arranged inside it. So the triangles themselves made a circle.
Yeah, so that one.
So like teeth inside a wheel.
Kind of.
Yeah, they were like isosceles. No, they weren't. They were random triangles. They weren't. They were the same, but they weren't like triangles or something.
They weren't equilateral triangles. They were when you get the long edge on one side and then evenly spaced on the other two.
Yeah,
That's
like that,
isosceles, isn't it?
on their side. Isn't isosceles got a right angle in it?
Oh, it might be. It's been a long time since I've done that.
I'm trying to remember the name of these particular ones. I can't remember them now, but yeah. It was like short squat triangles, but they were on their side and then arranged like you would arrange Pringles nicely around a plate.
Yes, and in the middle of that one, there was a little pile of stones and a feather that had been left there. But Stu pointed out in this particular one, contrary to the other one that we saw on the first time, that the way that the crop had bent was different. Yes.
Well, tell us how it had.
So in the first one that we'd seen, it appeared that I think the first one was wheat, wasn't it? And that appeared just sort of bent in random locations, somewhat near the base, but it was all just random creases within the crop. Whereas in the second one we actually saw, all of those ones that we pulled out, we could see that they were bent at the little like nodule bit sort of somewhere near the base. And there, in some of them, there was like a little hole, but it all looked like it was blown out. And they were all sort of bent at the same angle from this one particular place. Whereas in the first one, it was all sort of higgledy-pickledy everywhere.
Yeah, okay, so the crops weren't creased. They weren't broken at all. Well, I mean, they were broken afterwards, but the bend itself was just, as Amy says, on this node. And it was so strong, the node. I was getting pieces of the crop and bending it, wasn't I, Amy? And it wasn't breaking on the node. It was breaking elsewhere.
Yeah, it was very strong in that spot.
To all the same angle?
Yeah.
Did you measure the angle?
Didn't have a protractor, but when you held them up together, I think there was a couple we found that had a bit of a stronger angle. But
yes,
the majority of them were the same.
You'd get basically shading within the crop circle, where some parts of the circle will be at a sharper angle than others, and that creates a shading effect.
Okay.
But certainly within a specific section, all the angles are at the same, and all the same direction as well.
Yes.
So a sort of spiral.
Yes.
Well, that's not a spiral, it's concentric rings.
Yeah.
And interesting, Amy mentioned the stones and the feather at the centre of the circle. A lot of people do this when they visit crop circles. They'll leave a little offering of interesting stones, usually flint, because that's quite easily found around chalk areas like Wiltshire. Calkins, they're called. Or chalk babies. The little pieces of flint, and the feather. Yeah, that's people making an offering to whatever it is that created the circle, or to the circle itself. It's hard to tell. But that one was approximately 8 to 6 foot diameter.
Radius.
86 foot radius.
Yeah.
Blimey. So that would be a fair bit of work for someone with a bit of rope and a plank, wouldn't it?
Yes.
I mean, even the first one would be a fair bit of work for someone with a bit of rope and a plank.
Oh, and next to a busy road as well.
Yeah.
And from there, we saw the final crop circle that we visited for the day, didn't we? It was looked down on it.
Yeah, so on the way back from that one, just looked like sort of down the hill, we could see the other one. And this one, this was a bunch of circles. This was it Love backwards in ASCII?
Yes. So this was a number of different circles that formed almost like a W shape. Some of these circles were open and some were closed. And some clever person had worked out that it translated into ASCII code. And if you read it backwards, it spelled the word love. Now, I find that a bit bizarre and strange and hard to explain. But the great thing about that particular crop circle, so this was the oldest crop circle that we went to see that day. It predated the one that we had just seen that had been harvested by about 10 days in terms of reporting. But it was unharvested. So it's had clearly been walked in by people, and, you know, the act of walking in a crop circle breaks the corn, breaks the crop. But yeah, tell us about that one then, Amy.
Yeah, so that one, that one was still up. It took us a little while of finding it because it was quite hard to see from the side that we were walking down, but we found it eventually. And so that one, the circles were much smaller in that one. And like you said, it was arranged in a sort of M shape. So you'd have sort of 3 or 4 circles going up and then 3 or 4 going down and then back up and down. And those ones, the crop was laid down either clockwise or anti-clockwise around the circle. So some of them were completely flat and then some of them still had the middle up, so whether they were open or closed. And yeah, that one had a bit of a strange feeling through it when you walked through the first sort of area. There was an area with 2 circles down, which felt a bit sort of strange to walk through. Nothing too adverse or anything like that, but yeah, just a bit of a something compared to the other 2.
What kind of a feeling?
Oh, you know, just like a little bit of a goosebump, but not quite.
Okay.
But we were definitely in full sun.
And you're sure it spelled out love and not live or live on that?
I don't know. I read that off the Intel.
Okay. Because if they got that wrong and you're reading it backwards, that spells evil.
Exactly.
So maybe what you felt was the presence of the Dark Lord of the Abyss breathing down your neck and getting your address to come and terrorise you at some later stage. It's followed you home.
Is that what it felt like?
I don't know. I mean, I just look out the window. It's quite hot outside. So.
Yeah.
The tar pit's bubbling.
Yeah.
Dante would feel inspired. Well, I too got a spiritual vibe, a feeling in that particular. Well, actually, I got a physical feeling from it. I also got goosebumps, had palpitations, but I also felt really energized and almost like I'd just been given a shot of adrenaline.
Oh.
It didn't last very long, and it was just after I'd come into the formation. But yeah, it was really interesting. So yeah, each of the circles was either anti-clockwise or clockwise, but we couldn't seem to see any pattern to that, could we, Amy?
No. So we did go through, but it wasn't like one way, then the other way, then one way, then the other way. It was sort of every so often there would be 2 ways that were the same in a row, I think.
And it's not like all the closed ones were clockwise and all the open ones were anti-clockwise or anything like that. There didn't seem to be a pattern that we could discern.
I need to ask you about your T-shirt, Stu. Does that represent a crop circle?
It actually represents Avebury Stone Circle.
Oh, okay.
It's a stylized version, but I got it from the Avebury Henge shop. So shout out to the Avebury Hen Shop folk.
That's an interesting T-shirt. Nice spirally. I like it. It looks. It reminds me of a tunnel.
Yeah.
So, do you remember that program, Time Tunnel?
I do remember the Time Tunnel when they would throw themselves at the spinning spiral and suddenly become flattened.
Yeah. And they would end up on the Titanic. Or
Yes. Anyway, that doesn't make very good radio talking about my T-shirt.
It's about TV. No.
So that was... and again, it's worth mentioning that final one we saw, the crops were bent at those nodes, just like the one we had seen previously. But it was in really good condition, especially to say it must have been 40 weeks. 40 days since it had first been reported.
And the crop had been harvested, had it?
No, the last one it hadn't.
Oh, okay.
So that was great to see. Absolutely, really, really good quality one to end on.
Got a nice order of different ones to see. So the first one we think is clearly man-made, quite small, cut down. The second one's completely harvested, but has some other indications, and then the third one being completely upright still, with only a little bit of previous traffic visible.
Yeah. You could see where people had walked in it. So I'm going to throw the quote. So I'm quite vehement and passionate and opinionated about crop circles. I am firmly of the belief that the genuine ones are not man-made. Having now seen them for yourself, Amy, would you concur with that? Would you err on the side of caution? Where would you sit with that?
I believe that there are definitely ones that people make.
Yeah.
Because, of course, they would. Why wouldn't you?
Yes.
As to the ones that aren't so obviously man-made, I feel like there would be a reasonable explanation to explain how they happen in a way that isn't as something that we could easily replicate. However, what that explanation could be, I have no idea. So I'm quite open-minded as to what that could actually turn out to be, whether that's just some weather that could just flatten it just so, and that's how it is, or perhaps it's just something particularly wrong with that crop, so it grows in a weird way and it just turns out into a pattern that we recognise. I don't know, or something else.
The bit I have trouble believing is that people still find it entertaining to go out and make a crop circle. I mean, I can understand how at the start, there's a couple of guys going out with a bit of rope and a plank and making, but really, are people still doing that?
Yes.
Every year?
Yes.
And I mean, it must be a sort of country thing, is it? It's
well, no, it's like graffiti. You know, you might as well say, well, why would anyone graffiti?
And all you've got is fields.
Yeah, but
You do.
Some people do it because they believe they're creating art. Some people do it just for the attention, or some people do it to test themselves to prove that they can do it. There are lots of reasons why, and there are some professional crop circle makers out there who do it for money, who will, like do it for film and TV and things like that.
Yeah, wasn't there a Weetabix advert that someone had turned an entire field into a...
There was, and I visited that very crop circle as it was being made. It was just opposite Silbury Hill in Wiltshire. As it was being made. I also know it took them 3 days to make it with heavy machinery working all day. So the idea of a couple of blokes with planks doing it in the middle of the night... Nah.
Yeah, it just seems like a lot of effort and a lot of... Because, like, when you see them, they do look really quite precise. Like, there isn't too much that shows out of line. And while I can understand that could be relatively easy to do with a stick and a bit of string or whatever, I feel like that's a lot of effort to go through just to annoy some farmers and have something that people might not see. So
Hmm.
there must be something behind it, but yeah, I don't know what that could be.
Have you ever come across one before that's as easily translatable, that's actually written in ASCII code?
Well, I can't. I don't speak ASCII myself, so there are really intelligent, very very clever people who look at the designs and see meaning to them. Sometimes I'm really impressed at what meaning they get out of it. Sometimes I read the meanings and I think they're looking for meaning when perhaps there might not be. But a lot of it is, in terms of meaning, in terms of translation, a lot of it is mathematical. There was one, I think it was earlier this year, right at the beginning, that looked to me just like a series of lines with the odd small circles sort of dotted about at various points on it. Apparently, it was a visual representation of pi.
Okay.
And someone goes to paragraphs and paragraphs to explain why it's a visual representation of pi, which
Surely,
is like way beyond my
so,
level of understanding. But
isn't the circle just a representation of pi?
Well, that could be. You could definitely argue that. But yeah, so I'm an absolute believer. There's an intelligence behind these crop circles that are not man-made. Obviously, yes, some are man-made, no question. But the ones that aren't, there's an intelligence behind it. Amy, you're sounding very on the fence.
Yeah, I just don't know. So I wouldn't be able to rule out any kind of possibility. But my general feeling is there's generally a terrestrial explanation for most things. So
There usually is. What about you, Neil? Have we intrigued you?
You've intrigued me. It's nice that you've taken someone like Amy along with you, who isn't an out-and-out believer like you, who's prepared, but is prepared to concede. Yeah, I've no idea how this was made or what it was made by, and there's more to it than just flattened crops. But again, as we say, a UFO doesn't necessarily mean a flying saucer, does it? It just means something identified, and that's what this is. It's a strange phenomenon, and we don't know what causes it. And I mean, you could suppose extraterrestrials, but it could be something else that we just don't know about.
Yeah, the whole association between UFOs and crop circles, I think, is an incredibly tenuous link to start with. Anyway, all I can say, and all I can say, I believe, is that there is an intelligence at work now that's not man.
I mean, didn't someone once theorize that the crops have been flattened by a landing flying saucer? Or
yeah, that was back in the 1960s, Warminster, because you get a lot of UFOs around Warminster because it's close to an Air Force base. You always get UFO sightings around Air Force bases because people see things and they don't know what they are. But yeah, it was a random reporter just said, "Oh, maybe it's the landing marks from a UFO," and that was it. People have made the association ever since. But there we go. What do you think, though, listeners? Have you visited a crop circle? If so, what did you think? Do let us know via the usual means. If you haven't visited a crop circle, let us know what you think anyway. We just love hearing what people think. You can email us and tell us at aliensexplored@gmail.com. You can contact us on Facebook and on Twitter by searching Aliens Explored, or if you are one of our very exclusive and very special Patreon patrons, you get exclusive access to our Discord server where you can chat with like-minded people and maybe even share some photos and Do you know what? There might even be some video footage coming out soon from my little trip into Wiltshire with Amy, so keep your eyes peeled for that one. Join us next time, though, when we will be talking about a key figure in ufology history, Luis Elizondo. Probably a name you've not heard of, Neil.
I haven't, no. No, so I'm going to go and look him up.
We will be doing the research and finding out all about Lewis in the next episode. So join us for that. In the meantime, keep watching those fields in Wiltshire, in Hampshire, wherever you live. And of course, keep watching the skies. Take care for now.
Catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Aliens Explored is a Figo Films production in association with Juicy Falls. Music by Darren Mafucci and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Twitter and Facebook by searching Aliens Explored or visit aliensexplored.com.